Well, welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I'm Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. Unless you're watching on YouTube, and then you are watching the Janelle King Show. And this is new, fresh. I'm doing a candidate series interviewing individuals who are either running for office, have ran for office, it's in the political space, and we're having some candid conversations. So today, I would say this week, this show, we have our friend Robert Patillo. And before the break, you heard a little bit about him and a little bit about his background. One of the things that I stated is that we are friends and we have known each other for a very long time. If it wasn't for Robert, I don't even know if I would be in media. I mean, I don't know if I've ever said that to you, Robert, but media is a thing now because I was introduced to it by going on Robert's show, People, Politics, Passion, and it was fabulous. So now we're going to dive into it. I want to jump into this discussion fairly quickly because there's a lot to talk about. We know that you, Robert, and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
We know that you are no stranger to politics as a whole. However, as I stated before, I kind of grew up in the political space with you. And so when you introduced me to the media space, but I don't know much about your upbringing other than little small conversations. So for our audience, if you could share a little bit about your upbringing so that we can understand how you walked into this political journey.
Oh, thanks so much. And thanks so much for having me. It really is a pleasure. And of all the interviews I've done, you're the first person to actually ask me anything about myself during the interview. It's funny how that works in our politics, but I'm a Grady baby. I'm one of the few people left in Atlanta who was born at Grady Hospital, but I was raised down in Waverly Hall, Georgia. My mother is from Haiti. My dad is from Harris County. He went to Haiti on vacation in like the early 80s, fell in love with a girl 20 years younger than him. And now me and my sister exist here in America. So I'm a fan of the Passport Bro movement from a generation ago. But I grew up in a very strong conservative Christian household. My mother was Caribbean Catholic and my dad was Southern Baptist. So it was a very kind of strict conservative upbringing. But they got us into politics very young, understanding both the political situation that was going on where my mom's from in Haiti and also kind of the turmoil of the late 80s and early 90s in American politics. And that's really where I kind of cut my teeth in politics. My great aunt, Annie, I was actually a student at Tuskegee Institute and was friends with Booker T. Washington, one of the first Black women in the state of Alabama to get a professional degree, as well as a graduate degree, a doctorate from the University of Chicago in the early part of the 20th century. One of my cousins, or great cousins, Melba Beal Patillo, was one of the Little Rock Nine who integrated Little Rock Elementary School. So we kind of have a family history of being involved in activism and education, and that's really where I kind of didn't really have a choice about what I was going to do. I wasn't exactly going to go to school and say I was going to be a painter or a dancer. It was law and politics for me. My first campaign was working with Max Cleland. He was the former congressman from Columbus, Georgia. If you remember him, the Vietnam veteran, wheelchair, didn't have legs, etc. But he really was one of those conservative Democrats that I grew up with. When I got to college, I worked on the Kerry Edwards 2004 election as a student organizer. Of course, worked for Obama 2008 when I was in law school. I went to law school in Chicago, so you couldn't really not work for Obama in 2008 if you're in Chicago. Then when I moved back to Atlanta after law school, I worked for Jesse Spike's campaign for mayor. I worked for John Otzendine's campaign for governor, and many other conservative candidates. Tim Echols when he was running for public service commissioner. And from there is when I really kind of started transitioning from political consulting into media, where I started my radio show while continuing also to work for nonprofits like the Rainbow Push Coalition. I've been an advisor for Reverend Jesse Jackson for about 20 years. So I consider myself pretty centrist. I kind of go across the political landscape, as you can hear, everything from conservative Democrats to Republicans to progressives. I kind of bring all that to this race running for judge here in Fulton County.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because before we jump into your race, I do want to touch on the Rainbow Push Coalition because you were the executive director. Are you currently still the executive director? And if so, can you explain some of the mission focus of the Rainbow Push Coalition as it stands today?
And certainly, I left Rainbow Push at the end of 2022. I promised Reverend Jetson I'll get him through the 2022 midterms. I did that, and then I took some time off for myself, worked on some federal contracting, went on vacation, which was great. My wife's 50th birthday was last year, the end of last year. So we took a cruise from Barcelona through the south of France and then back to Ibiza. It was great, but after you take a little time off, you do some working, you want to get back into the arena, and this is me hopping back into the arena. But the mission of the Rainbow Push Coalition was and is to bring together a broad rainbow of people of all colors, complexions, creeds, to work towards social justice and progressive change. This can include everything from reform to police brutality, changes to laws with regards to voting, and economic issues, working with unions, working with immigrant groups, economically disenfranchised individuals. The way Reverend Jetson describes it is as being a lobbyist for the people. That these corporations have the ability to go out and hire these multi-million-dollar lobbyists to advocate for their political issues. But for poor people, you have nonprofit organizations, you have social justice groups, you have civil rights organizations that have to go and represent and speak to the people in power on behalf of their constituencies. And that's what I did for 5 years, executive director of Rainbow Push.
So as when we're looking at current affairs and looking at where things are today, I have to get a little personal because you are 50% Haitian and the border is a huge discussion right now. So I know this has nothing to do with what you will be doing as Superior Court judge, but I have to ask because of your family connection to Haiti. What do you think about what's happening? Should we allow Haitians to come in to America as it stands today? And what do you think about the border and securing the border?
I'm going to bifurcate the question. So let's start with this question: what we should do about the border? We've needed to have a comprehensive immigration reform package passed since 1986. The last time we did anything on immigration was when Reagan did blanket amnesty in '86. Since then, we've had McCain-Kennedy in 2005. We've had the Schumer Compromise in 2013, the Obama Compromise 2015, Durbin-Rubio 2018. We had the Reconciliation Bill in 2021. We had the Langford Bill in 2023, and yet still we have not been able to get anything done about this. We can have a actual intelligent border policy that includes a pathway to citizenship for individuals who are already here, that includes legal representation and recognition of the dreamers, that deals with funding, border courts, asylum, immigration judges to be able to handle these international claims of asylum, that also involves investing billions of dollars in the physical border and border deterrence, that we need to have the ability to inspect the millions of shipping containers that come to America every year that nobody looks into, that contain much of the fentanyl illegal drugs that come from Asia, that can deal with not just a border wall, but dealing with the tunnels that exist under the southern border, as well as the investing in the Coast Guard and their ability to intercept some of the drug submarines that come from South America. But that doesn't happen unless both parties can stop demagoguing the issue. Everybody who supports border control is not racist. They do not want to take migrants and shoot them in a catapult across the border. They simply want an organized border system. Conversely, everybody who supports immigrants' rights does not believe in open borders and amnesty. They're simply saying that we want to have the same treatment for migrants coming from Central and South America that we have coming from Europe and other places. I think once we can take the demagoguery and kind of the excessive nature of the conversation out of it, and actually get down to brass tacks and trying to solve the issue, we can have the type of border compromise necessary to really fix the problem. But, I remember organizing about immigration reform in 2002 during the midterm elections, right when before they were doing McCain-Kennedy, and we're having the exact same arguments now that I have gray in my beard and in my hair that I was having when I was basically a teenager back then. We have to get out of this intransigence. What the issue of well, go ahead.
Well, because I don't want to cut you off because I do want to hear your second half, but I do want to say a lot of things you listed I think are definitely necessary. I think we have made strides towards certain things. To your point, we need to do more. However, looking at the state of where things are now, do you think we should close the border and create while we're working on these other things, or do we leave the border open and then allow people to come in without it being checked? Or, we have people that are jumping across the border who We have no clue where they are, where they're going, and in some cases we do. So where do you see it on what type of action can we do today, right? Like right now, because we're in a crisis right now.
Well, so this is the part of the issue with semantics on this issue. The border has never either been open or closed. It's just always kind of existed. If you look at Cheech and Chong movies from the 1980s, they talk about illegal immigrating back and forth across the border, as people have done for generations in this country. So when we're having this conversation, it has to be about how exactly do you pass the legislation necessary so that if people come to America with a valid asylee claim, we have enough judges that will be able to see them, determine the claim, and actually take action on that immediately. When we talk about the physical border that has to take place, me and you right now can hop in a car, drive cross country, go to the Mexican border, walk directly across, and then walk directly back across. That's just the nature of the border, and we could have done that under any president in our lifetimes. We have to figure out how to put the types of technological aspects there that can stop the human trafficking, that can stop the fentanyl, that can ensure that we have the resources needed at the border, and then also work with the other nations within our hegemonic sphere of influence to deter the pipelines that are leading to this. We can't ignore America's record when we, just 5 years ago, that we were trying to overthrow the president in Venezuela and replace him with Juan Guaido, and that created the instability that we see in Venezuela. Now we see a bunch of Venezuelans integrating to America. We can't pretend that we didn't have a role in that as a nation. So this is why we have to work with our friends within our sphere of influence to stop the flow and stop the engine that's driving migrants to America, and then also we have to reform American drug policy. The reason that these drug cartels have so much money is because of American drug policy that drives up and incentivizes them to do so. So it has to be a broad-based issue. And when we talk about open, close the border, it almost sounds like there's a switch where you just walk down there, pull a lever, and say border's closed. But I think we have to get to a legislative place where people really want to get in there and do things.
I mean, I think you sort of can do that, but I mean, I don't want to make this a discussion on the border because I do know that we have a lot more to get into. But I do think that there are things we can do to kind of shut it down. There are other countries that you're not able to just kind of walk in and waltz out. And then, but to your point, there are opportunities for people to break the law in other countries as well, which is when you jumping in and out, or you're coming in and not leaving. But we do have a process, right? So to say, I mean, there is a border process that we have in place. Now, are our elected officials abiding by it? No. Are people actually respecting it? No. But I do think there's a process in place, which kind of leads to your current race, because everything you're going to do is about processes, is associated to processes. So I know you believe in that. So now that we've kind of discussed your personal position on certain things, let's dive into your political future. So recently you announced that you will be challenging Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee, who recently, we know him. He's kind of raised to fame or kind of became this focal point because of his connection to overseeing the election interference case that Fani Willis has put forth, as well as the case to disqualify Fani Willis, who's our current Fulton County District Attorney in the upcoming election. But before we dive details deep into that particular race, there's another race that I kind of want you to touch on. The first time you ran for office, you ran for Georgia House seat. I think it was in 2012.
Yep.
I just kind of want to know, what did you learn during that race that you're using in this run? And then I'd like to know what you thought about Judge McAfee's decision as it relates to Fani Willis, and if you would have done the same thing.
Well, what I learned in 2012 was one, when you're in your mid to late 20s, for some reason, you really think that your ideals and your smile can really, I know you need to raise money. That's a very important part. Ideas and wishes and good intentions only get you so far. Then also the mechanics of a campaign are the most important part of the campaign. I very much am good at the speaking with voters, laying out ideas, bringing forth kind of the organization necessary to run a campaign. But I need someone else to do the paperwork. I need someone else to make sure we're doing the campaign filings on time, to do the disclosures, to make sure all the ducks are in a row. And it's entirely too much to try to do all those things yourself. I've always been one of those, like, I'll do it myself type people, kind of that old school male ego idea. Like, I'll be the finance director, I'll be the media director, I'll be the campaign director, I'll be the candidate, I'll write the press releases, I'll build the website, I'll drive the campaign car. No, get people to help. And that's what I've learned. Build a team, learn to take advice, learn to take help. I think the interceding decade or so since I ran for that first office, there's a reason it's taking me over a decade to run for office again. And I was very much in a position of saying, no, I would never run again for office. I very much enjoyed the position of being in the media. You know, the good thing about being in the media is there's no consequences for being wrong. You can make a take. You can stand on it. If you're wrong, you just pretend it never happened and moved on to the next one. And there's always another topic of conversation. There's real accountability when you're actually running and when you're in office. And that's really what led me to run in this race against concurrent with Judge McAfee. Judge McAfee was appointed by Governor Kemp at the end of 2022. So this was really an open seat that Judge Brasher vacated. And this is the first time that it's up for election. So it's not that I'm running against Judge McAfee. I don't want people to think that this has anything to do with him. We're just both running for the same seat that was vacated by Judge Brasher. And I can't get into the details of how I feel about someone else's decision. One, that violates the judicial canons. But two, I don't have the same information Judge McAfee had. None of us had access to all the filings that he read through. None of us had access to the in-camera discussions that he took place or the witness testimony that he heard. We heard the very public aspects of it, so I'm not going to second guess him based on information that I may or may not have had. But I do think what is important is when we're talking about the Fulton County court system, we had 10 people die in the Fulton County jail last year. One person was eaten to death by bed bugs. I remember this because I had to go on Iranian TV to explain how America, the most advanced country in the world, had somebody eaten to death by bed bugs in one of their jails. And the reason for this is we have people who are awaiting trial for 5, 6, 7 years at a time before they can get to trial. And many inmates would love to have the situation where the prosecutors are rushing to get their case to trial, the same way the prosecutors are rushing to get Donald Trump's case to trial. Inmates and defendants would love to have a situation where they can spend 2 weeks having a hearing on the prosecutor as opposed to 2 weeks having a hearing on them. And the point is that we have to have fairness and equity in our criminal justice system. There are inequities in Fulton County that are very much drawn along socioeconomic lines, even more so than racial lines. The people who are wealthy, well-connected, politically astute have a very different experience in the Fulton criminal justice system in this county than people who are poor and downtrodden and live in zip codes that don't appear on reality TV shows and rap videos. So because of that, we have to have judges in place that are able to balance the needs, to move cases along, to ensure fundamental fairness, and to protect the constitutional rights of the individual. I argue that if you are in jail for 5 years awaiting trial without being convicted, that's an Eighth Amendment violation. That is cruel and unusual punishment. I believe that if you are denied a bond and you have to wait 6 months or a year just to have another bond hearing, that is a constitutional violation of the individual liberties of the defendant. And we have to either dismiss those cases and allow the prosecution to re-indict them or get those cases moved along. And once you start doing that, you are really affecting the change from the system that's necessary. The problems we've had in Fulton County existed long before Donald Trump and Fani Willis. That was just long after Donald Trump and Fani Willis. I'm running to fix that system, not to address any individual case.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the system because, you know, when you've been a part of the system, you know, you're an attorney. And so you've been a part of this and being able to either support or not support in some cases. Now, Fulton County is a very unique breed, right? It's a very unique group of voters in the sense that it is very blue. It tends to be very blue. It's almost like you're pushed in that direction regardless. So how would you do it? And you're a self-described conservative Democrat. So in what ways would you say your conservative side plays a role, and what policies as it relates to Fulton County, criminal justice reform, or any of that that's associated with your job would you say aligns conservatively?
Oh, certainly. As you know, I'm a very strong supporter and defender of everyone's Second Amendment rights. You know, I was on the board of the National Association, or National Black Gun Association, National African American Gun Association, NAGA. I've spoken at the NRA convention in 2017 with Wayne LaPierre and their executive board. Also, I believe strongly in individual rights and individual liberties. And this is why I talk so much about the overreach of government power. I think that any conservative out there who just think for a second that government agents come in, take you off, don't tell you what you're charged with, put you in a condition of rendition, hold you without a bond for 6 months or a year prior to you even finding out exactly what the charges are against you, and then they hold those charges over your head while you're in custody for 5, 6, 7, 8 years while you're awaiting trial. I think any conservative will say, well, that is a violation of our fundamental constitutional rights. And we need to have a smaller government imprint and impact on the rights of the individual. Either you charge me or you let me go. Either you try me or you let me go. We have to have a system that supports and defends and respects those constitutional rights. I think that in addition to that, we have a prosecutor to judge pipeline in this country, where people who are prosecutors their entire career just slide down along the bench, wait for somebody to either retire or go to a different office, and then they become a judge. And just like with a hammer, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. It's something that, and if you're a prosecutor your whole career, every defendant looks like they're guilty. We need to have judges who have a broad-based experience. If I'm making a determination to sentence somebody to life in prison, I think you should have had the experience of sitting next to a client that was sentenced to life in prison, that you understand what it means to an individual, that you've met with families, that you've sat down and seen the consequences of your decisions. These are not academic decisions. This isn't something to feed into an algorithm and just have the ruling spit out by the supreme intelligence. These are real life human beings, and you damn sure better have some experience dealing with that. And those are the decisions you're going to make. I think if you're ruling on a wrongful death case, that you should have handled extensive civil litigation, so you know the ins and out of that, not just the what you've read in a book or what you've seen on a CLE video. I want somebody who's actually experienced that. If you're dealing with family law cases, if I'm taking custody away from a mother and giving it to the father or giving it to the state, I need to have had the experience of representing a mother, representing a family, and understanding the impact that has on those individuals. And when you have a pipeline that simply feeds people directly from the prosecutor's office, directly to the judge's bench, they lose all those connections and all those experiences that come from being within representing clients and really be on the other side of the table. I think in addition to that, we have to have more people in office who are not government or who are not lifetime government officials. You need to have as much experience signing the front of a paycheck as signing the back of the paycheck. And when you have judges who are used to the private sector, they run their courtroom the same way they would run a law firm in the private sector. There are deadlines that have to be met. There are burdens that have to be reached. There are determinations that have to be met at a time period that is necessary. And if not, then you're either going to have things dismissed or there are going to be consequences for that. When you have somebody coming straight from the prosecutor to the judge's bench, everything is a further notice, everything is a continuance, everything is going to be pushed down the line, because when you're dealing with government employees, often everything turns into the DMV, and that can't be the criminal justice system.
Well, okay, so you keep kind of alluding to the prosecutor side. Is McAfee coming from a prosecution side, or are you just speaking in general terms?
I'm speaking in general terms. I implore every voter to fully look up and vet every candidate in the race. I believe there's 3 candidates in the race, and I will stand up my positions, my history, my experience, 15 years prosecuting the Fulton County court system up against anybody else who's running, but check and see if they have experience outside of the government. Check and see if they have experience as defense attorneys, as civil attorneys, as family law attorneys, as civil rights attorneys, representing individuals, or if they've always just simply been a part of the government, a part of the governmental system. And then that will help you determine how you should vote in the election.
So you don't have any issues with Judge McAfee, but because like you say, you're not running against him, you're just running in the race with him. But there's clearly some differences in how he's operating in that role, because that obviously would encourage you to want to run and replace him, correct? So if there are some challenges, some differences there, what are the differences, and what should what should voters look for when they are researching these candidates?
Well, again, I fully, and I hope Judge McAfee comes on your show also to talk about his record, his experience. So I don't feel that it's necessary to spend time talking about other people, because I'm got enough ego to talk about myself plenty during the entire period of time. But but I think in addition to that, we need to have judges who are entrenched in the community. We don't need judges who are Olympians, who stand on high and look down on the people. You want judges who you see in your community, who are impacted by the same things in your community that you are, that you see at the grocery store, that you see at the gym, that you see at church, that you see at HOA meetings and community events. People who are entrenched in Atlanta and what it means to represent this county and represent this city, because when people have buy-in, we know that leads to the best results when it comes to determinations in the criminal justice system. Even when we're talking about community policing, we say, well, if you have police officers who live in the community, you have better outcomes for those communities. I believe that if you have judges that live in the community and that actually interact with real people, then you have better outcomes for what happens in the courtroom. I think there has to be more transparency. There has to be more use of technology in courtrooms so that everyone has an opportunity to see exactly what's going on. I was doing a case probably 6 years ago. This was right when all those kids were running around Midtown robbing people. If anybody remembers that. So it was a bunch of like 14, 15, 16-year-old kids like robbing people by Piedmont Park. And so I represented one of them. And so I talked to him and talked to his aunt who was raising him at the time. And so what happened was he was a straight A honor roll student. His parents got divorced, and he kind of went through a psychological breakdown during that. While his parents got divorced, one of his parents died. Which sent him further down a hole. So that's why he had to get taken in by his aunt. His aunt then got stage 4 breast cancer while she was taking him in. And he very much became lost and distraught at 15 years old and got taken in by a gang who offered him camaraderie, who offered him brotherhood, who offered him, friends to hang out with. And that's how he ended up in this situation in Piedmont Park. Now, does this excuse the crime that he committed? Absolutely not. But does it give context to what happened? And does that speak into how exactly we should treat this? Because we should treat this almost medically, as in what can we do to reform this young man, as opposed to simply saying, what can we do to lock him up for a long time? Because eventually he'll come out, and eventually we want him to be a productive member of society. And this is why I say that it's important to have people who are entrenched in the community, who understand those things. Because if you're putting together an alternative program for them, saying, well, you still have to serve your jail time, but while you're in jail, you need to be working on getting a HVAC certification. You need to be working on getting a tradesman certification. You need to come out and be able to be a productive member of society. So instead of coming out with a PhD in crime and a doctorate in scamming, you can come out and be able to drive trucks, be an electrician, be a plumber, and all the jobs that we need in our community. I think that by being connected to our community, we get better at that.
I think that's all great, and I'm glad you mentioned the case with the young man, because it actually leads into my my final question. That's more on a serious note before we go into our Would You Rather segment. But it kind of walks me into that, because what we're seeing is that a lot of the upticks in crime, particularly in the Fulton County area, is being committed by young people, particularly young men who are under the age of 18. And so there are a lot of policies in place that kind of protects them, even though they may be committing these terrible crimes. And we can't have context on every single individual. So particularly when it comes to making decisions, what do you think, or what is your vision as it relates to tackling that issue with our young adults and our youthful offenders that are kind of now going through the system?
Absolutely. And I have a lot of experience with this, because during that same period of time, it seemed like that was all I was doing for 2 years, just those youthful offender cases. And what I learned is almost always that these things happen after a major life or major family trauma. And for wealthy kids, when you have a major family trauma, they send you to therapy. They send you to boot camp. They send you off somewhere to get your mind, your body, your spirit realigned, so they can keep you out of the system. When you're poor, you just have the streets. And in many cases, I think that we can partner the Fulton County Superior Court and state court system up with nonprofits, vocational institutions, educational institutions to craft sentences where that is part of your sentence. So let's say you get convicted of armed robbery at 16 years old. mandatory minimum is 20 years. We give you the option that we can reduce your sentence from armed robbery to robbery, but in which the minimum is 10 years. So you still have to do your sentence. You still have to go to prison for the crimes you committed. This is not a we'll give you a slap on the wrist and you get to turn around and leave situation. But if you take a first offender sentence, if you complete your courses that are necessary to get your certification in a trade, so something like plumbing, electrical, electrician, HVAC repair, long haul trucking, don't care what it is, you can partner with many of the institutions that exist here in Atlanta to get your GED and to get your certification, those sorts of things. Then we will allow you to simply serve the first 5 years of that sentence, and then if you complete all the aspects of your probation that are necessary once you get those certifications, then we can give you a first offender treatment where we can clear your record and allow you to go off and actually be a productive member of society without having that conviction hanging over your head. By doing this, you remove the individual from the community while they are being rehabilitated. You give them the tools that are necessary to be productive members of society. You expose them to a different function in our society, where instead of it's just the drug dealers and the gang members who have nice cars and who have money in their pockets, they're actually exposed to trades and other programs that give them the ability to understand that they can be part of the primary economy in America. And you actually are creating a new generation of young people that have tools, skills, abilities, as opposed to simply people who go to jail, they go to jail as a robber, and they learn from a murderer how to be a murderer. They learn from the drug dealer how to be a drug dealer. They learn from the pimp how to be a pimp. We are actually trying to teach them and rehabilitate them and save them so we can have more stronger young men going forward.
Okay, I think that is phenomenal in the sense that you're giving them the opportunities, you're putting it in front of them, you're saying basically, here's a chance, even though you've already made some decisions that are not good, but here's a chance to do it differently. And I believe that what's going to be the determining factor between whether they accept those opportunities, accept that option, or even taking advantage of it in a sense that where it can actually turn into something that is long term. I think the deciding factor is going to be trust. And a lot of what our young people are dealing with, they don't trust our criminal justice system. They don't trust it at all. They don't trust police officers. They don't trust the judges. They don't trust the attorneys. I mean, it's just really, really bad. So how do you restore trust in the community so that now they don't see you as an enemy?
That's goes back to my point about being part of the community. That if you are going before a judge and you actually recognize the judge from going to church with your grandmama, you're a lot more likely to trust them than it being some almost imperial individual that you've never met, you've never seen, you've never interacted before. I think that the members of our judicial system have to be entrenched in our community. They have to be out there. They have to be hosting community fairs, speaking at high schools and elementary schools, doing mentoring programs, speaking with 100 Black Men of Atlanta. Being out there in the community gives you that, what they call in the hood, the face card. Where people know who you are, they know exactly what you represent, and they know they're going to achieve fairness in front of you. Judges have reputations in our courthouse just like any other. So people know that if you get assigned to this such and such judge, you're going to get a light sentence. This judge is going to give you a hard sentence. I think I want to be the judge where they know they're going to get a fair opportunity and that their future is going to be in their own hands. And that when you're in that Fulton County jail, the old heads will tell you exactly what you got to do to get up out of there. If they tell you as one of these young people, you're going in front of Judge Patillo, this is what you're going to have to do. You got to get your certifications. You got to stay in school. You got to stay out of trouble. But he will give you a fair opportunity, and you'll have a chance afterwards. That's what gives young people the trust to buy in and really work hard. Because I believe in the redemptive nature of people. As I said, I grew up as a Christian conservative. Christianity is about redemption, and it's about second chances, about the sinner having another opportunity. And I think that's what we have to provide in our criminal justice system. While also, and I explain this to people when they talk about the hard on crime versus soft on crime, we also have to make sure we're still punishing individuals and ensuring that they pay their debt to society. It's not a get out of jail free card, it's a second opportunity card.
So would you say, or how would you answer this question that when people ask, do you believe if the system is racist? Do you believe the system's racist? And if so, why join the system and try to work within it in order to help the community?
Yes, of course the system's racist. We don't have to pull, the mask down over our faces. We don't have to pretend. We don't have to live in the land of make believe. The system has a very racial tinge to it. But I think what we're seeing in recent years is more so than a racist system is a classist system. That is a place where if you are, let's say, a famous rapper who gets found with a bunch of guns in the back of your car and you're already a convicted felon, somehow with enough money, that can just all go away pretty quickly. This is why I say that with the class divide, particularly in Fulton County, is far larger than even the racial divide. That if you're an individual who is politically well connected, that's well known, somebody who has money, people who have access to $1,000 an hour attorneys, the criminal justice system is completely different than it is for an individual who's indigent, who has nothing around them. Even the clients who I've represented, where their grandma will come into my office and pull the money out of her bra in order to pay for criminal defense for her grandbaby. Just having a private attorney completely changes your experience and your outcome in the criminal justice system. Not to cast aspersions on the public defenders who do an outstanding job with the workload they have, but just having a private defense attorney changes the way that the system sees you in this county.
Well, to be clear, are you saying that having a private attorney is somehow like having option or opportunity to a private attorney, it's less racist, or it's racist to have to utilize a public defender because of your economic standing?
What I'm saying is that we have a divergence. We have a system that has racism and built upon it. But then on top of racism, you have the class divide that exists. And often the class divide now we're seeing being even larger than the racial divide between groups. Now, you do have the issue that normally people from non-African American communities have more resources and therefore have access to private attorneys, and because of that, get better outcomes to their cases. So it's an intersectional issue as opposed to a black and white line issue. My point is that we have to put in place judges that are able to clear out all of those lines. They'll be able to rule on all cases, regardless of race, regardless of sex, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of your socioeconomic stature, who are able to give fair and even judgments across the board. And the reason that I jumped in, as you said, why would you become part of a corrupt system? Teddy Roosevelt gave a speech where he said you have to get in the arena. And I've been on the sidelines. I've been a gadfly. I've been a critic for years, saying what somebody else should do and how can we make XYZ do this. I want to be the person who inspires more people to get in there and just do it themselves. Being a judge is a thankless job. If you think that it's all this excitement you see on television, it is not. You wake up like 5 o'clock in the morning, you get to the courthouse, you read the calendar, you have individual hearings. It's not like fun and games and excitement. So many criminal defense lawyers don't want to do it. I want to inspire more criminal defense lawyers and civil rights activists to get in there, run for DA, run for solicitor, run for judge. If you want to fix the criminal justice system, we can either protest and wave signs outside the Capitol and City Hall all we want, or we can be the people making the decisions. And I think that you have to be the first in that fight and the first to stand up if you really want to make those changes.
I think it's interesting. So I'm one of those people, which you know me, and I'm one of those people who I don't believe that the system itself is racist. I believe there are racist people, and that can be in a lot of different places. I don't think we can legislate the heart. I don't think we can eradicate racism out of anyone's heart with a policy. But I do think that there's a bit of a danger in there when people think that the entire system is working against them. If I have a public defender, am I going to feel like I'm not going to get the same amount of support because I have a public offender? I can't afford someone who is a private attorney. That's something that I think that we have to kind of dig into a little bit, because there are people that believe that, and that's kind of sending the message that public defenders are not as good. And that if that's the case, then we need to do something about that.
Well, as I said, I don't want to cast any aspersions on public defenders. They do a hell of a job. Well, if you want somebody with trial experience, find you a lawyer who was previously a public defender, because they're going to trial every single day. But with that, they're going to have dozens of cases as opposed to your private attorney who might have 3. And so their ability just time-wise to dive into your case the same way that your private attorney can just isn't going to be the same. When I'm representing clients, I can go to the courthouse with a manila folder because I got one dude that I need to talk to and one judge I need to talk to. The public defender is coming in with a cart. because they have dozens of cases they have to deal with. So it's not that public defenders aren't as capable. It's simply the point that there's a preference given to people with private attorneys. Often judges will say people with private attorneys get to go first. So they'll have all the private attorneys in the jury box, and they'll run through all of them before they even get to the public defender cases. I don't think that's fair, that the people with money get to go first. Prosecutors often have different conversations with private attorneys versus public defenders. And then there's even an intimidation factor that if you're a rookie prosecutor in the complaint room who's dealing with all these stacks of cases, and then the super lawyer walks in with the $10,000 Armani suit on, who's getting paid $1,000 an hour, often the plea deal you give him just intrinsically is different versus what the person, the public defender gets. And of course, there's inbuilt bias in the system. I'm telling you a story about one of my clients named Matt. Matt was a bartender at a bar we've both gone to together in Atlanta. He got pulled over for a DUI with a bunch of cocaine in the car. But Matt looked like Captain America. He was gorgeous. I mean, 6'2", brown hair, blue eyes, chiseled jaw, a little bit of stubble, like six-pack abs. I mean, just a gorgeous guy. So we get to court. Matt's in his suit. I'm in my suit. The judge says, how do you plead today? So I start talking, and the judge looks at me and says, could you let your lawyer talk? Because the judge, looking at me, the black guy, this is in Fulton County, thought that Matt, the tall white guy with the chiseled jaw, the blue eyes, and the Captain America look, was the attorney. Ooh. And when we talk about biased in the system, when you have judges, and this is a judge who had been a prosecutor their whole career and moved onto the bench, and they're only used to seeing the black person as being the defendant and the white guy as being the lawyer, there's a bias built in there where they can't even conceptualize for a second that the black guy, the short husky black guy with a heart of gold, it might actually be the lawyer in the case, and Captain America might be the person who was drunk driving the wrong way down Piedmont with cocaine in the car. So when we talk about taking bias out of the system, part of it comes from having that perspective to understand that what you see before you isn't always what the situation is. And if you come in with a fair mind and a fair heart, you can get fair outcomes. And that has to be the goal, that regardless of what the input is, that we need to be trying to get fair outcomes out.
Well, do you think that that's a bias, that's a general bias, though? Or do you think that that's just that particular judge that did that? I mean, are you saying this is something you think is more widespread in Fulton County?
I think it's widespread in our judicial system in general. There's, I'll give you an example. White people and black people use drugs at almost the exact same rate. Every study has shown that. But if you go to the Fulton County Jail and look at people who are in jail for drug possession charges, you're going to see almost all black folks being in there. If you go to court, Superior Court, I've been in these courtrooms for 15 plus years at this point in time. If you go to court on a Tuesday morning where they're doing plea deals for many cases, you'll hear the kid from Buckhead who got arrested the weekend before, who had Molly and X and some cocaine in his pocket, and his dad got him a great lawyer, and now they're before the judge taking a plea to community service, and his record will be clean once he's done with his 40 hours of community service, etc. And then directly after that will be a black kid from the SWATs who was arrested with rock cocaine in his pocket, and now he's being sentenced to 5 years in prison. When you see this over and over again, you can either say, like, man, this is a random coincidence that this happens so many times in a row, or you can say that this is something that's built within the system that has to be built out of the system. That's the difference that I think that many people have. When you're talking about recognizing the inequities in the system, you don't have to recognize them as being eternal or forever. You can recognize that there are inequities in the systems that you can fix. And this is why I say that we have to start jumping in there, because I think that if we were to put Judge Janelle on the bench, she will be able to eliminate that in that courtroom. And if you have Janelle in one courtroom and Robert in another courtroom and someone else who's fair in another courtroom, eventually you get that out of the system by simply changing the people in the system. But I think it's innocuous to think that we're going to keep the same people and get different results.
You know what, I've learned a lot in this discussion, and I think the biggest thing that I'm hearing is that, you know, we have to make sure we pay attention to who we are electing to sit in these roles, regardless of their race or whether or not you feel like they agree with you ideologically or politically. I think that we need to make sure that we have people that are that have the right intentions while they're in that role. How do we find that? Through vetting. And Robert, you've been very vulnerable and transparent in this discussion, which I think is a positive. I think that's a good thing. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I want to have more conversations where people actually answer the question. So we appreciate you for doing that. And that's going to lead us into the fun segment. Now that you're off the hot seat, so I have 3 quick questions. These are going to be quick fire questions. You cannot provide an explanation. It is called Would You Rather?
Okay.
All right, here we go. First, would you rather preside over a complex and high-profile case that has garnered a lot of public attention and public interest and investment, or would you rather preside over a series of routine cases that lead to small wins that will have a long-lasting impact?
Oh, give me the small cases all the time. I've been on TV and radio
No
enough.
explanation.
I don't need any more. I don't need any more attention. Give me the little cases.
Okay. All right. Would you rather prioritize rehabilitation and diversion programs for nonviolent offenders rather than focus on strict sentencing guidelines to deter criminal behavior and ensure there's public safety?
Deterrent programs all day. I know you said I can't do an explanation, but statistics and studies have shown deterrence does not work. If somebody knows in Iraq that they will be hung and dismembered for killing somebody and they're still killing people, that means deterrence just does not work.
So rehabilitation and diversion.
Yes.
All right. All right. Would you rather handle cases involving cutting edge technology and digital evidence requiring a deep understanding of cybersecurity and privacy laws, or would you rather handle cases that are rooted more so in traditional legal principles and precedents that has stood the test of time?
I'm going to take the digital cases. And I know I'm not allowed to give explanations, but here's why.
Oh my gosh, Robert.
Last thing. We have to, the part of the problem is that we have these backlogs in the system because we're not using technology. These judges in courtrooms need to be leveraging social media. They need to be leveraging Zoom and Skype and Meet. They need to be using AI and every piece of technology possible because we have a literal decade-long backlog and we need to use every tool we can to get through them.
All right. So cutting edge technology is where you will land. And
exactly.
I mean, look, you're young, so I'm not that surprised. And throughout the course of the conversation, I kind of figured where you were land on some of these questions. And that again goes back to your openness and your transparency. And we thank you so much for that. And thank you everyone for joining, for listening in on this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're listening to it on the radio, then you've gotten a snippet and you can go to the podcast and listen to the rest of it. If you're on YouTube, you've seen the whole thing, or you may have caught a clip, but either way, the whole entire interview will be on this platform. So thank you so much, Robert, and I wish you all the best in your race.
Thanks so much. And if anybody wants information on the campaign, go to patillo4judge.com. Patillo4judge.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And make sure you follow him on all social media platforms as well. All right, until next time, let's continue to have candid conversations.